Hi folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. We're here this week with Dr. Loretta Breuning, founder of the Inner Mammal Institute. You're going to learn how to make peace with your inner beast. Before we get to the show, here's the review of the week. This one is from Twitter. Robbie says, "This wild diet stuff isn't so bad. Down 11 pounds in 15 days. Woot!" All right, Robbie, congratulations, man. If you're listening out there right now and you've changed your body and life and you want to let me know, of course, you can always tweet at me. Find me on Facebook under Abel James or Fat Burning Man. You can also leave a review on iTunes. Every little one helps, and I read every single one of them. You can drop me a line at abel@fatburningman.com to share your story as well. I always love hearing from you guys. The way that I cover costs of bringing this show to you is by creating courses, ebooks, apps, and premium online programs to help you get results anywhere you are in the world. So this week, before we get to the show, I hope you'll consider checking out our new and improved 30-day wild diet fat loss system. In this plan, we share 30 days of mouth-watering meal plans that are designed to help you drop fat with real food. The meal plans are paleo-friendly, easy to make, and literally the meals that my wife Allison and I eat just about every day and night to stay lean, fit, and happy. Are you having trouble losing the last 10 to 20 pounds of stubborn fat? Have you tried going low carb or the paleo diet without getting results? Do you want to upgrade your workout performance with more power, speed, and endurance? Listen closely. The Wild Diet 30-Day Fat Loss Program is a transformational plan we developed after years of researching and coaching the most effective, permanent, and healthy principles behind rapid fat loss and total body recomposition. Since then, thousands of folks from all corners of the globe have achieved massive positive change in their lives using the Wild Diet 30-Day program. In the program, you'll get the most effective method of meal and nutrient timing to best stimulate fat loss and muscle recovery, the facts about how much protein you really need, how to cycle carbohydrates to maximize fat loss and muscle gains, 30 days of specific healthy fat-burning, paleo-friendly, and wild diet-approved meal plans, and tons more. And if you grab it today, you'll even get a special discount. All you have to do is type in this special URL, fatburningman.com/30 days. That's the number 30 and DAYS. Once again, just type in fatburningman.com/30 days and you'll get a special listener discount on our 30-day program. All right, so on to the show with Dr. Loretta Breuning, an expert in mammalian brain science. On today's show, you will learn how to quit bad habits and reprogram negative thought patterns, why it feels like we're always thinking about our next meal, how to rewire your brain using mammalian brain science, why a bad hair day feels like a survival threat, and much more. All right, let's go hang out with the doc. All right, folks, I'm very happy to be here with Loretta Breuning PhD, who's the founder of the Inner Mammal Institute and author of Meet Your Happy Chemicals. Her books and resources have helped thousands of people worldwide to make peace with their inner mammal. How's it going, Loretta?
Great, thanks.
I'm so happy to have you here. We're going to have a really fun time, I think. One of the most transformational books I read years ago was called The Naked Ape. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's an oldie but a goodie.
Desmond Morris?
Yes, but it basically just tells us that we're wild animals, right? And you take this one step further by linking our mammalian behaviors to brain science. So how do we make peace with our inner beast, as it were?
When we understand the job that our brain chemicals evolved to do, it's easy to see that they turn on for reasons that don't always make logical sense. And that helps us understand why we have ups and downs and to accept that our ups and downs are natural instead of being so committed to trying to force ourselves into a constant high.
Right. And I think there's this tendency to think that we have our brains under control or our behavior under control. And what your books and your work kind of show is that we're all a little bit subservient to our critter brains, right? Which are freaking out all the time. If you ever watch a squirrel or one of the lower, I'm using air quotes, mammals,
you see that they're pretty frenetic and wired up all the time. As humans, we think we're beyond that, but we're really not. So how are we similar to what we see out there in nature, and what can we do about it?
Here's a really funny example. When I take people on a zoo tour, we stand in front of the squirrel monkeys, and you look at their faces and their eyes. They are looking for food every second, even though they're well fed by the keepers, which is, of course, not the natural state. They never stop with their eyes, like looking, 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 looking. And so I tell people, if you ever find yourself standing in front of the refrigerator wondering, why am I here? Your brain designed to seek constantly. Now, you mentioned about behavior and emotions, and of course they're separate, and we do have the power to control our behavior. So what I'm suggesting is to be more accepting of our up and down emotions while still sustaining responsibility for our actions.
Right.
And that's because we have a brain structure that animals don't have that helps us project the consequences of our actions a couple of more steps.
And how accurate are those?
Oh, very good. Okay, how accurate are those projections?
Right.
Exactly. In the modern world, we expect everything to be forecast 100%. So every day, if the weather is not average, it's like, oh my God, it's deviating from. So we expect to project. If we don't like uncertainty, we're supposed to eliminate it. Mm-hmm. But in fact, our expectations are learned from past experience. So your expectations of rewards are learned from past rewards, and your expectations of pain are learned from past pain. But the quirkiness we all have is that our brain is, let's just say it's soft until the end of puberty. Mm-hmm. And then you're sort of stuck with a certain neural network. And it's like you can add new leaves to the tree, but you can't build new branches. So the rewards and pain of your youth have a really powerful effect on your brain chemistry.
So in a way, you're locked into a system or paradigm or template of thinking and behavior, but you're not necessarily aware of that moving into adulthood.
Yes, and of course, I wouldn't say locked in, because then all of our efforts are for naught.
Right.
So let's say you are strongly pressured into it, mm-hmm. and it takes so much effort to transcend above those early circuits. And what I say is the only way you can transcend that is to focus all of your attention on it. And mostly we don't want to do that because, like that monkey, our attention is all over the place.
Right.
And it feels unsafe. And in fact, for a good reason, because you're designed to constantly be focusing on the whole world rather than just on your head. Mm-hmm. So when you focus on your head and suppressing an impulse, it takes all your energy.
So when we're constantly looking for something as humans, which is kind of turned on within us, right? We're not necessarily looking for food. Is it safety? Is it freedom from difficulty, security? What are we looking for without even realizing it?
Yeah. Okay. There's the long answer, which I wrote a bunch of books about, but I'm going to give you a really short answer. We have a droop. Every time our happy chemicals spurt, then they droop. They're designed to be metabolized in a few minutes. So when we have this droop, we're like, oh my God, what went wrong? How can I get that feeling back? So what we're rushing toward is whatever we believe is going to cause the next spurt, which is based on what caused the last spurt, plus the opportunities in our environment, which, from an animal perspective, they're always scanning their environment for opportunities. Mm-hmm. And we learn that from experience.
So that pattern of behavior, though, even though it is somewhat automatic, isn't necessarily effective in the real world when it comes to brain chemicals, right? Because if you have chocolate once a month and it's the best chocolate you've ever tasted, that's going to release a surge of happy chemicals, essentially, right? But if you have the same chocolate every night and you expect it every night to do that same magical thing, you're kind of going to be putting yourself into a rut, aren't you?
Yeah, it's so amazing. And this is something that you have to see in monkeys to get the power of what I call, it's disappointment is what we would call it in human terms. So they gave the monkey an extra special reward, which in this case was a sip from a box of apple juice rather than spinach, because that sugar was for them a powerful reward, natural. And after a few days, well, first when they got the apple juice, their dopamine surged, but after a few days, their dopamine didn't surge, even though they were still getting the apple juice. Mm-hmm. And so a few days later, the experimenters switched the monkeys back to spinach as the reward for the task that they learned to do. And they went into a rage. And so the moral is, when you have something good, you take it for granted. Yeah. It doesn't make you happy anymore. You need more to make you happy. But when you lose that thing, you feel awful.
Right.
So, I mean, it's amazing that applies to everything: relationships, jobs, hobbies, food, everything. And once we know that and we stop externalizing it, it just makes things easier.
Yeah. Well, how do you embrace the downs then?
How do you embrace the downs? So here's the thing. When your happy chemical stops flowing and you dip, two things happen. One is our natural impulse is to look for evidence of harm, because that's what the bad chemical cortisol is designed for, to alert you, oh, I smell a lion, whatever. So then you look for the lion. So when your bad chemical, the next thing is, we humans, we know we're going to die. Animals don't. And so we can never stop looking for evidence of threat. So if my life is completely safe, then the worst possible thing that can happen to me is like not being invited to such and such a party, let's say.
Right.
That can have the full feeling of being chased by a lion, because there are no bigger threats in my life.
Right.
So embracing it is to say, I'm creating it because, thank you, brain, you are trying to protect me from harm. In the state of nature, social threats are survival threats. And so I'm feeling like my survival is threatened, but it's just a chemical and it will be metabolized in a few minutes.
Why are we so out of whack in terms of how we feel about threats? So what I mean by that is what you were saying. You get a bad haircut, and that's a survival threat, and a survival level type response in terms of stress.
Yes.
What is that all about?
So I always say that our brain is quirky for two reasons. One, we already talked about, because it's wired from youthful experience, and children don't have survival knowledge, so that's quirky. The other quirk is big. Your brain cares more about the perpetuation of your genes than it does about your body. So a simple example would be that an animal who takes a survival risk in order to have a mating opportunity, and then they die, their genes are going to live, where the one who doesn't take a risk and dies of old age but never makes copies of its genes, we're not descended from them, you know, because they didn't pass on their genes. So we're descended from the ones who took risks. And so we're always sort of balancing this, should I take a risk? Because if I don't pass on my genes, then it's a sense of annihilation. And we're not thinking that consciously, but remember that animals are not thinking that consciously either. Why are they so desperate to find mating opportunity? I always say they don't understand conception conceptually, and yet in the end they feel desperate about it. It's because of these brain chemicals.
Yeah, that is so interesting. So what do you do?
So a bad haircut, of course, affects your mating opportunity from your mammal brain's perspective.
Without you really realizing it. Right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So if that's our highest concern without realizing, what are some other things that can, I guess, fire off those negative feelings, behaviors?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. In maybe a certain context, you had children as soon as you were in puberty, then they had children as soon as they were in puberty. So you could be a grandparent in your early 30s. You'd probably die soon, but at least you spent your old age having a visceral sense of yourself carrying on.
Yeah.
So that's what people did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Today, it's harder. Your children may not have children until you're in your late 70s,
Right.
for example. So if you count on that, it's not going to work. So
Right.
people find other ways. The word is legacy. So everybody wants a legacy. And that leads us to the same ups and downs, because on the one hand, it feels great when you, what I say is you make your unique individual essence. That's what DNA is, but that's what a podcast is. It's your unique individual essence. You do something that will make it survive, but then the slightest threat to your unique individual essence is a survival threat. So
Right.
we're back to the same thing.
Like when someone deletes my RSS feed.
Exactly. It threatens your survival. Yes.
Yeah, well, my internet survival anyway. But let's talk about another thing that you referenced before we started recording this interview, alarmism. I think what we find, especially in terms of the messaging that we get from, the health industry, really, is so alarmist. It's putting us on edge about everything all the time. What do we do about that? What are the implications there?
This is a really tough one, because I agree it's the health industry, but it's also the news industry.
Sure.
And the entertainment industry are just overwhelming with these very visceral negative messages. Maybe this is a moment to mention my book, Beyond Cynical, Transcend Your Mammalian Negativity.
I enjoyed it, yeah.
So we feed into these negative messages because, like what I say is, think about if you're an animal and you smell a lion, you can't relax until you see the lion. So we're always trying to see the lion. So these people who are telling us, here's the lion, here's the lion, here's the lion. No, I know where the lion is. So if you want to screen them out, you have to screen out almost everything. And then it's hard to connect with the people around you, because that is how we mammals connect with others, is by fearing a common enemy. So it's a very hard call. I struggle with it all the time. And the best I can do for myself is to say, I'm so lucky that I have a choice. In the past, this belief system would be forced on me. This group would be forced on me. And yet I have the freedom to choose. And then when every choice looks pretty negative, I can say, oh, it's not because I'm in a bad world. It's because we're all mammals.
Yeah. So what are some practical things that you do, knowing what you know about not only the mammal brain, but your brain in particular? What are some things that you can actually do in your day-to-day life when you see one of those things kind of creeping into your habits or whatever? How do you shut it off?
Very good. So I'll give you a little example and a bigger example. The little example is, and I'm sure we've all been through this, I'm waiting for a plane. I'm in the waiting room, and I happen to be near one of those CNN monitors.
Yeah.
Now, right? Now, normally I wouldn't go anywhere near this constant negativity, but I think, well, I'm just going to be here for a minute. But then the minute turns into 5 minutes, and I've heard like 10 cases of death and dismemberment in those few minutes. And it takes me a while to realize that that's having an effect on me. And once I realize it, I just move. No matter what the inconvenience, it's not worth exposing yourself to that. So that's the small example. Now, here's a bigger example. Every one of us has aspirations. We have social aspirations, material aspirations, and we inevitably get disappointed because the minute we get what we want, we make another aspiration.
Yeah.
So we have to get disappointed because we're always wanting more, which is sort of the natural thing that our brain is designed for. So here, let me give you a personal example. So if I check my numbers, we all have that impulse to check our numbers. And if something is up, then I feel great. But then for the rest of my life, it has to be more than that in
Right.
order for me to feel great.
Yeah.
And the next time it's lower than the new high, I'm going to feel bad. That's crazy. That's a prescription for misery.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone has their own way of dealing with this, but I just don't look at the numbers. Um, I know that's not practical advice that other people can take. So I will say that I'm retired officially, technically. My kids are raised, I'm professor emeritus. So I'm not saying that's for everyone. We all
Sure.
have to come to our own peace with it. But the other way I look at this is to have small goals that we can achieve. So if I say, in the next 3 hours, I'm going to accomplish X. And when I get that, I'm going to feel good because I know that my real impulse is to say, all I got done was X. I need to do Y and Z and A and B, blah, 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 blah. So I have to consciously make doable goals, reach them, and then feel good about it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the secrets. It's something that I've been doing for a while. Ever since I broke my foot last year, it's been hard to exercise, right? Or it was for a while after that, especially doing the types of exercises that I wanted to do every day or certainly every week. And so to avoid getting down on myself, I tried to figure out a way to make it feel good by just doing something very little every day. And so I'd work out for 2 to 5 minutes and just do something really simple like push-ups or handstand push-ups or something like that, trying to build a new small skill because I knew that I couldn't reach the levels of progress that were basically interrupted by an injury. And I think that's something we commonly experience. But it doesn't have to be limited to any particular domain. Another thing that I think you could probably relate to as an author is that when you finish a book, you feel great for a little while because you finished a book, right? And then you need to write another one. And you're like, oh God, that was hard. What do I do now? And, with something of that magnitude, it's hard to feel good about almost any amount of progress. You work on something for 10 hours a day and you're just like, oh, I just made a bigger mess than I started with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to understand how our brain chemicals work.
Yeah.
And this is a good time for me to explain 2 different ones that really help us see through all of this. So the one that I talked about already is dopamine, that when you approach a reward, your dopamine surges. Once you get the reward, it's like, been there, done that.
Right.
Now I need more. And you can think about how it would help cavemen survive. If you found a pond full of fabulous fish, it's like, wow, this really advances our survival.
Mm-hmm.
But then now we have that pond of fish, and it takes a bigger pond of fish to advance our survival. So now let's talk about serotonin. This is totally not what you hear in the public domain,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very easy to see in the animal world that animals are constantly comparing themselves to those they're around. And if they find themselves in the stronger position, then they feel safe to go toward a bit of food or mating opportunity. If they're in the weaker position, it's not safe to go toward the food or mating opportunity. They'll get bitten and clawed, and their survival depends on not getting bitten and clawed. So when it's safe to assert yourself, you get a surge of serotonin. And so in the animal world, you're not surging with that all the time because then you'd be what in human terms is called a jerk or other epithets. And you would be killed because you would be asserting against bigger critters and you die.
Right.
So you only assert when you can, and then it feels great. But we humans expect to have that one-up feeling all the time. We've categorized it now as depression if you don't have it. So we expect to have it. So how do we get it? So we make some construct. If only I do X, Y, and Z, then I can feel like I have the moral high ground or the some other high ground. And then the minute you can't do X, Y, and Z, oh my God, you're like the monkey who feels like everybody's stealing his food and everybody's stealing his mating opportunity and he's going to die.
Yeah, and that's an interesting phenomenon as you move ahead or move forward in life, right? You have more stuff, maybe you have more career success, you have more accolades or whatever. But then there's this feeling that in order to stay on top, you need to not lose things, as opposed to the thing that got you there, which is moving constantly forward.
Exactly. And this is what, a lot of the mainstream conversation is about this jealousy of the top monkey, as if I'd be happy forever if I were only the top monkey, which is so not true. So it doesn't pay to waste your energy being bitter about the top monkey. And when you see that urge in yourself, just to have some self-acceptance and say, yes, on the one hand, I want to take a step ahead because it does make me happy. On the other hand, I know that once I take that step, I'm not going to be permanently happy. And if there is a rat race, it's because I created it, and to not take it so seriously. It's hard to do that because our brain chemicals evolved to give us this urgent feeling. So it's really sort of blocking your feelings in a way, which is what we're told not to do.
Blocking the ones that don't really serve you, right? That's where I've been doing meditation for years, but even before that, I was running for 3 hours a day, or I was playing music for 3 hours a day. And those things always seem to make that noise go away. I think for everyone, you can find your own little thing, but there's something about engaging in a more positive behavior that turns down the noise. As mammals, is there anything else that science kind of shows why that works, or other things that people can do to block that stuff out?
I think the greatest tool is to know that you could always create a new circuit. So, to use your example, if you think, well, I can feel calm if I run 3 hours a day and listen to music 3 hours a day. But let's say something happens and you can't do that. Then you're like, oh my God, how am I going to be calm? I can create a new circuit. So whatever we're currently using to distance from our chemicals, to know that the electricity in your brain flows like water in a storm. It finds the paths of least resistance, and it's hard to build new pathways, but if you repeat a new behavior for 45 days, it will build a new pathway. It won't be big enough to, it's hard to compete with your old pathway, but it will be big enough to feel natural. So, I don't know, do you want to think of an example?
Well, yeah, I think seeing it in action, there's an interesting one because we recently moved out here to the Smoky Mountains. And so when our dog first gets to a new place, she's, looking around like every other mammal is, trying to figure out what's going on. And during tick season, which is a lot of the time, we always, when she gets to the front door after a walk, we have her sit and then lay down and roll over. And over the course of time, it took about, I think you mentioned in your book, 45 days for these new neural pathways to really be automatic. And you could see that building up over time. So now, at first, she wouldn't really want to do it. She'd be so exhausted, to get to the door, be like, sit, and then she'd be like, and just sit, kind of not sit for a little while. And then finally, she'd sit down, and then every step took longer than it should. But over the course of time, now she just gets to the door, and I might just say over, and she'll just roll over, and we'll check her for ticks, and then she's not allowed inside before that happens. But it's automatic at this point. It just happens.
That's a perfect example. Exactly. And the main thing, what you said is, it takes longer than you think it should.
Yeah.
That's what's so amazing. And that in the initial steps, you think it's never going to happen. But then once it happens, it's effortless and automatic. And then you realize that that other thing you loved so much, that just was learned in the same accidental way. But all this time you were thinking it was somehow superior and necessary.
And it's bizarre because it's so hard to build behaviors and habits that you enjoy doing. What's the deal with that?
Yeah. Oh, here's the thing. It's what I write in my things is it's not easy being a mammal.
Yeah.
So here's a deeper mammal, the deeper thing. So we are born helpless and vulnerable. we are born in a more vulnerable state than any other creature. Even though, you see those tiny little babies in some species that are blind and hairless and can't move. But think about a human baby. It can't even lift its head for like a week, It takes humans longer to meet our survival needs than any other creature. And during all that time, you're building circuits in your brain. So the core circuit in your brain is, I'm helpless and vulnerable. And what calms us from that circuit is the support we get from certain individuals around us. But is that support 100% reliable? No. Nobody grows up with perfect support. And if you did, you'd be an adult who couldn't cut their own meat and tie their own shoes.
Yeah.
So we have to lose that support if we ever had it. So that's painful. So whatever taught us in youth, oh, this is what I need to get support, that's the thing that we desperately want. So it's very sad because for some people, let's say it's being the class clown. Let's say when I interrupt the class, then I get what my vulnerable self feels it needs. Here's a really sad example. Let's say if a person gets sick, and that's when they finally get the attention. Then their inner mammal learns, oh, I need to get sick because then my vulnerable self will get the support it needs.
Sure.
So it's very sad. We're all quirky. We all end up getting some kind of quirk. And just to know that it got there from accidental circumstances and that you are safe.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something that I didn't see a name for it in your book, so I'm just going to name it myself. The unhappy dog poop phenomenon. Can you expand on that a little bit? When we should be happy because things are improving dramatically, yet once we get there, we're not so happy after all. It's a tragedy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me bring up another brain chemical that I haven't talked about yet, which is oxytocin. So we hear a lot about bonding and teamwork and things like that. So what makes mammals unique is attachment. So we mammals, reptiles are alone their whole lives. They run, the second they're born, they run away from home. And if they don't run fast enough, their parents eat them. And then they avoid their colleagues the rest of their lives.
Mammals are more cuddly.
So mammals are cuddly and they tolerate the presence of others, but not just anyone. They're totally picky about who they can tolerate. They only feel safe near others when their oxytocin is flowing, and that depends on the circuits they've built from their early experience. So if I smelled you when I was near my mother, then my oxytocin was flowing. So now I have an oxytocin circuit for your smell. So eventually the smell of everyone in my herd becomes sort of okay. Now, when I grow up, I will learn that you will actually steal my food and bite me, but I'm not going to leave the herd because then I'll instantly be eaten by a predator. So I'm going to tolerate your crappy treatment because I don't want to be killed by a predator. And so to use your question now, why do we feel bad even when we feel good? So let's say that you and I migrate to a new pasture where we have much better grass, but you're still biting me over the good grass. And I'm still going to feel like I'm going to die if I leave. And so I still want to be around you because you trigger my oxytocin, and when it falls, I feel like I'm going to die. So
sounds like a typical relationship to me.
But not just a typical relationship, but a work group, your team at the office, the people you work around, the people you talk to in a bar, people bond around complaining about the common enemy, complaining about their, the people who are stealing their grass. So it's all focusing on the negative is stimulates bonding. And if, I don't know, maybe it's not as bad for men, but if you don't focus, if you don't, like, I feel your pain, if you don't agree, then you're considered like you're out of the herd. You're not a good teammate.
Sure. Yeah. Now, was it France that you said you went to where basically they had a dog poop problem and in America we don't? But over the course of time, right, it was like just littering the streets.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah.
Can you bring up that example? I think it's so fascinating because it's so true. I'd never heard that before.
Oh, well, if this is from the opening of Beyond Cynical, if it's the example I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So I was so indoctrinated to think that France is perfect. That was my first indoctrination. Then I went on to Japan is perfect, Africa's perfect,
Right.
pick your perfect spot. Portland, Oregon is the latest, whatever.
Yeah.
So when I went there was like dog poop on the street in Paris, but it was somehow like I had to find an explanation that their dog poop was okay because it was Paris.
Right.
So it just shows you the degree to which you're shaped by the neural pathways that you have, the neural pathways that your herd has because you don't want to be kicked out of the herd. And in this case, my herd was like, our society is bad. And I would, if I said anything good about our society, the obvious example being that people don't let their dogs poop on the street anymore. Like,
Right.
Wow, that's pretty good. Whoever would have dreamed years ago that could have happened?
Right. So I'm not, I guess I don't have enough time on this earth yet to remember dog poop littering the streets unless I go to a foreign country where it's just totally normal, right? But like,
Yeah.
one of the amazing things is that you don't see it necessarily as progress. Like crime rates go down, but all of a sudden you hear more and more about crime, right?
Yes.
If you look at the different decades, dog poop goes down. Instead of, just kind of ignoring most of the dog poop that's everywhere, you focus on that one jerk who let it happen, next to your friend's house or something like that. And it's
Absolutely.
a huge to do. So
Yes.
what's going on with your brain when something like that happens? What is that phenomenon?
Well, I'm calling it the 80-20 rule, which we've all heard of.
Yeah.
So think of it this way. I talk a lot about my experience in Africa. So let's say that if 80% of the people who drive down the street will bribe a policeman who pulls them over, then everyone says, well, that's normal. That's how it works. And if you don't go along with it, you are a bad person. But if only 20% of the people bribe the policeman, then everyone says, oh my God, what is this world coming to?
Yeah.
People are bribing policemen all over the place. But really the progress of going from 80 to 20 is fabulous. Now you could sort of have a functioning safe streets where people drive in their lanes and the police are not totally corrupt. But that's at the expense of this sort of constant vigilance.
Yeah.
And it's that sense of vigilance that helps make things work, but at the same time leads to frustration. But if you take that vigilance with a grain of salt, then you're considered an oddball by the other people in your herd.
Yeah.
So it's not easy being a mammal. And that's, by the way, that's my free slide share. So you can look at that. But if you want, but where's the easy answer? You know? The easy answer is like, I'm a mammal and everybody I know is a mammal.
Right. And so one thing that, just to kind of wrap this up and put it all together, we need to realize that especially when we arrive at whatever goal it is or whatever progress has been made, we're going to be unhappy. We're going to be happy for a little snapshot of time, and then we're going to be scrambling to try to stay up top, as it were. So we need to know that that's going to happen ahead of time, prepare for it, and then once you get there, kind of remind yourself every day that progress has been made. One thing that I do is if I feel like that's happening, especially if I know I've been working hard, but I feel like I'm not getting anything done, I'll go back in my head, pick up my notebook, and write down the things that I did that day or the things that I did that week. And that always feels better knowing where you came from, right? Just 24 hours earlier.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I'm so glad you got it. It's really good. And I just want to add one more little thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if this applies to you, but it's the feeling of I can't take a break until I've earned it, right? But if you get into that, then like you'll never think you earn it. So it's like, I have to take a break every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to take a break that's fun. So if I get to the point where the thing that I'm doing for this break is not pure fun, but it's like, oh, but I can, I have a little energy left. I should use my break to do something that's like leading to a goal or good for it. Like, nope. So here's a simple example. It's like, well, here's a movie. My husband sort of wants to see it. But it's a downer. It's like, nope. There has to be one time every day that I do something that's not going to be a downer,
Yeah, I like that. And to loop back on your or my earlier example of writing a book, for example, instead of being happy when I finish it, which is not really that realistic, I'm happy if I wake up in the morning. I decide to be happy if I wake up in the morning and work on it for an hour. And then, I close it, I make my coffee, and then I go and do my other work or whatever. And I don't necessarily have to go back and work on it. I can if I want to or whatever. But same thing with a workout. If you just get a little one done, you don't have to work out for 2 hours a day and then feel good about it. It's like you get that little piece, you work it into your habits, and then you feel happy about it. So before we go, how about one more little bit? Because I know you're big on habit formation. What do? We need to replace the bad habits, the bad pathways that are kind of automatic. But what are some practical tips to help make these new habits part of you?
Here's a really simple one. Focus on the behavior you want rather than the behavior you don't want.
Okay.
So it's easy to think, I need a new habit because I'm really bad about X, and you're going to focus on the thing that you're bad about. So think about, what do I want to replace X? An incompatible behavior. So the simple human example is, if you're holding a cigarette, think of something to do with your hands so that they're not holding. So whatever it is, think of the behavior you want. Focus on that, but it's going to be a behavior that sort of interferes with the behavior you don't want, but only focus on the behavior you want. And then in the short run, you're going to say, well, this isn't fun. This isn't making me feel as good.
Yeah.
But it's just, I can build a new pathway. I have power over my brain. In 45 days, I will feel so good about having this new habit that then I'll create another habit. And define each new habit small enough, because you can't build a whole new branch in your brain. You can only build a new leaf on your branches. Mm-hmm. But you can graft those leaves onto like existing branches.
Yeah.
So graft onto something that already makes you happy.
Oh, I like that. And isn't it funny, though, that while you were mentioning that, it's not easy to build any habit, really. And all habits kind of are not great at the beginning. They're not that fun, like you said. But neither is smoking, drinking, a lot of the other negative habits that we see that people do all the time. The first time that someone drank, I remember the first time I drank my dad's beer, and I did not have a good time. It was disgusting. Same thing with smoking, right? You're hacking. It's terrible. So even these bad habits have these things about them that aren't good at the beginning. So it's important to realize that across the board, good habits and bad habits are all difficult at the beginning. You need to be very intentional about it.
Well, so you raise, why then do we have the bad habit if it felt awful? And you only have it because your brain perceived it as a reward. Mm-hmm. So why does something that feels bad seems like a reward? Because in that moment in time, you felt awful, and whatever that thing you did, it distracted you from the awful feeling. Mm-hmm. So a simplistic example I use is, if I fail a math test and I go to a party, the party erased the feeling of the math test. So now every time I feel bad about myself in some way, I think going to a party will help, because that's the circuit I built.
Right.
And obviously it makes it worse. You don't learn math, but that circuit is big, because in that moment in time, you learned it. And why was it so big? Because anything that happens to you in puberty, your brain surges with brain chemicals during puberty for a specific reason, because in the state of nature, you moved to a new environment to get a mate because that avoided inbreeding. And so our brain just sucks in everything that happens during puberty. So you're not intending to act on that lesson, but that's how you got it.
Right. So fascinating. Well, we're just about out of time. But before we go, Dr. Breuning, why don't you tell people where they can find you and what you're up to?
Thanks so much. Well, my website, Inner Mammal Institute, has everything. My book, Meet Your Happy Chemicals, will be transformed in January with a new publisher to a new book called Habits of a Happy Brain, Retrain Your Brain to Boost Your Dopamine, Oxytocin, Serotonin, and Endorphin. Cool. I did the wrong order on those. But the new book has lots of exercises to lead you through this step by step. It's published by Adams Media. It's already on Amazon now. Habits of a Happy Brain. You can reorder it. I really like it, so I rewrote everything. I have a book called I Mammal, which explains this sort of one-uppy thing that's going on in our lives. And I have a new video for those people who tell me, I like your stuff, but I hate to read.
Yeah.
So video is called Your Ups and Downs Are Natural and Also Learned, and has 3 parts. And I have a blog, Your Neurochemical Self.
Wonderful. So if you're listening, your work is cut out for you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'd love to have you back. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. It was great, and I'm really happy that you get it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Fat Burning Man. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, the podcast app, or wherever else you might be listening to or watching this show. Got a second? Please leave me a quick review on iTunes. I always love hearing from you, and if you think someone else might like and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or with a family member. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at FatBurnMan and Facebook by typing in Abel James or Fat Burning Man. Drop me a line anytime. Did you know that I've recorded over 150 episodes of Fat Burning Man, winning 4 awards in independent media and hitting #1 in more than 8 countries? And here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode for free. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. I'll give you a second to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes in video and audio versions for all the past episodes of Fat Burning Man. Better yet, enter your best email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide to start burning fat right now and a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free fat burning download straight to your inbox, and make sure that you never miss a show again. This is Abel James signing off. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. Before you go, don't forget to grab your listener discount on our 30-day fat loss plan. In this plan, we share 30 days of mouth-watering wild diet meal plans that are designed to help you drop fat with real food. The meal plans are paleo-friendly, easy to make, and literally the meals that my wife Allison and I eat just about every day and night to stay lean, fit, and happy. In the program, you'll get the most effective method of meal and nutrient timing to best stimulate fat loss and muscle recovery, the truth about how much protein you really need for your body type, 30 days of specific healthy fat-burning meal plans as a done-for-you nutrition strategy, and tons more. If you check it out today, you'll even get a listener discount. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com/30 days. That's the number 30, DAYS. Once again, that's fatburningman.com/30 days. I'll see you there.
There's another problem with paleo, and this harkens back to the Atkins days and why so many of the low-carb crowd are holding on to pounds they don't want to. I felt this when I lost my first 50 pounds.